We've been going through, I say we've been going through, well, so far we've done the SEC, and now we're going to take a look at the Big Ten as we go week by week and preview the major conferences in college football. We are looking at a win total over, a win total under, a conference champion, and a dark horse conference champion. So someone that's outside of 5-1 or outside of the top two favorites seems like what we'll describe as a dark horse. Unless you want to bet Rutgers to win the win the Big Ten.
That seems smart.
That could happen, I suppose. Big Ten. Let's do a quick rundown of the odds to win the Big Ten championship game. You could get Michigan or Ohio State at the same plus 165. You can get Penn State 6-1, Wisconsin plus 750, Iowa 12-1, Illinois 30-1, Minnesota 40-1, Corn. It's Corn 60-1, Maryland 80-1, Purdue 100-1, Michigan State 150-1, Northwestern 300-1, Rutgers and Indiana 500-1 if you want one of those two. And I don't think that Rutgers and Indiana are necessarily worse than Northwestern, but they would have to go through the Eastern Division, which is that's where Michigan, Ohio, that's where the top three favorites live. While there's almost zero chance Northwestern could win the West, that's more of a chance than Indiana and Rutgers have of winning the East. So, with that said, let's go. I'll go to you first, Scott. Who is your conference champion and why?
My conference champion is Michigan. I think Michigan should probably be 11-0 going into the Ohio State game, and they have the Ohio State game at home. So I think Michigan is going to be the representative from the East in the Big Ten championship game. Their running game is elite. Blake Corum's back after the injury that he suffered last season. They have a dynamic 1-2 punch with Donovan Edwards as well. And J.J. McCarthy's a star at quarterback. Like, he's coming into his own. They're favored in every game right now. If you look on DraftKings, they are minus 2.5 at Penn State, which is probably their most difficult test. Not probably. It is their most difficult test prior to the Ohio State game. And because they have the Ohio State game at home, they're favored right now at minus 2.5 over Ohio State. So I like Michigan to finish the year at worst 11-1 and win the Big Ten.
I like that as well. And if you like that, you probably like their win total over 10.5 as well.
I do, because I think that they should, like I said, they should be 11-0. Going into the Ohio State game. If they lose, let's say they lose at Penn State and they're 10-1, then they'll need the win over Ohio State to get into the Big Ten championship game. They'll be 11-1. They'll go over the 10.5, and they'll beat whoever comes out of the West.
I'm with you. I like them to win it at plus 165. I like them over 10.5.
Now, I might feel differently if the game was at the Horseshoe.
Right.
If it was at Ohio State, I'd feel a little different. But I also just think that, like, this might be the past 2 years, let's say, might be the most talent that Jim Harbaugh has ever had at Michigan.
I don't think it's might be. I think it's without question.
Yeah, and this year, with the quarterback finally coming into his own, I think McCarthy is a Heisman candidate, and I think this offense is ready to roll.
In the last two seasons, let's face, you mentioned them. There's essentially two losable games on the schedule: the Ohio State game and then the Penn State game.
But they're favored in both of them right now.
In the last two seasons, Michigan is 4-0 against those two schools, and they've won those four games by an average of 16 points per game. Penn State, Ohio State, both changing quarterback this year. Michigan isn't. They're set. They returned J.J. McCarthy for his second full year. It should just get better.
There's no more Cade McNamara there to decide, maybe we go in this direction. Nope, it's his team.
I think Michigan is the best team in the country, not called Georgia, so I've got to slot them in here. They return most of that core from the last two seasons. They're top 20 nationally in TARP, in returning production, and they're second in the conference only to Wisconsin. They've won the Joe Moore Award the last two seasons for best offensive line in the country. This year's line looks better than those two. You mentioned Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. 2,450 yards combined last year, 25 touchdowns. Behind the best offensive line in the country. The defense was strong last year, shouldn't lose a step. Importantly, I think, Harbaugh brought back his entire coaching staff. Like, there was a lot of talk about Harbaugh leaving. There was talk about his coordinators getting big jobs. Everybody stayed. What I also love about picking Michigan to win is you could probably hedge out late season if Ohio State, for whatever reason, looks unstoppable. But with all the turnover Ohio State has, I don't know that I'm going to look at them as being unstoppable. Another thing of note, to just talking about the talent that Michigan has, PFF just released their preseason all Big Ten team. Michigan had 14 guys on the preseason all Big Ten team. Now, you might say, well, how many teams do they have? They have 3 teams. So there's going to be 66 guys.
Yep.
But remember, there's a lot of teams in the Big Ten. And
there's more than 10.
There's more than 10. And 7 of the Michigan guys were on the first team. Wow. So this is an incredibly stacked team. While Ohio State's trying to replace C.J. Stroud, I think McCarthy's just due to get better. You've got the best quarterback you've got the best running backs, you've got the best offensive line in the conference. I think Michigan's a solid bet at plus 165.
Yeah, and J.J. McCarthy, 18-1 to win the Heisman right now, I think is a sneaky little bet.
All right, let's talk about your dark horse. Who do you like? If it's not, let's just say if it's not Michigan or Ohio State, who do you see it?
I think the only way to play a dark horse is you have to pick a team from the West. Because no one in the East is going to beat Ohio State or Michigan or Penn State. And so the 3 of them are not dark horses. So automatically I go look to the West, and I think Wisconsin is the most likely to get to the championship game out of the West. Luke Fickell comes in at head coach from Cincinnati and gives them instant credibility. They also brought in a new offensive coordinator in Phil Longo, who worked under Mack Brown in North Carolina. So he saw Sam Howell, light up that offense from a passing game perspective. Before that, he was at Ole Miss, where he led a prolific passing attack. So who does Wisconsin have to play quarterback to run this offense? Well, they bring in Tanner Mordecai, quarterback
Not
from
Graham Mertz anymore.
No,
thank God.
Tanner Mordecai from SMU, who ran a high-flying passing offense there for the Mustangs. You look at their schedule, they'll be 6-0 right out of the gate. They're likely a 9-win team, maybe a 10-win team if they can beat Illinois or Minnesota on the road. Those are 2 tough road games. But the rest of their schedule, 9 wins at least for them. So I also like their over 8.5 as their win total at minus 130. But I think that they are the most likely representative from the Big Ten West to be in the championship game. And when you're looking at a dark horse to win this conference, all you need is just to be in the championship game, and you got a shot. So I'm taking Wisconsin to represent the West and be the dark horse to possibly upset a Michigan or an Ohio State or a Penn State in the title game.
That was my thought as well, but you kind of kicked me in the nuts there because I went with Penn State. It's 6-1 is my dark horse, and you said they're not a dark horse. I don't know. When you got two teams that are like plus 100 something.
Listen, we set the rules. We said anything 5-1 or greater. So at 6-1, you're well within the rules.
And my thought was
Wisconsin plus 750. By the way,
if this team, Penn State, if they can split the Michigan Ohio State games. And everybody splits those 3 games.
Yeah, then it goes down to the highest.
There's some sort of tiebreaker.
It's the highest ranked team in the college football playoff rankings.
And depending on when the losses happen,
Which the Michigan-Ohio State loss will be the last thing that the committee sees, so the loser of that game might actually drop below a Penn State.
So that my thought is if it gets into some sort of a 3, I don't think Penn State can beat both those teams. I just don't. But if they can upset one of them, you've got a chance. They climbed out of the gutter last year after a couple rough seasons, at least by Penn State standard seasons. Finished 11-2, and they lose Sean Clifford, but I don't know how much of a bad thing that is, considering Drew Aller looks like he's ready to be the next big thing at that position. They returned the majority of their offensive line. The defense is going to be solid again, and outside of those 2 big dogs, the schedule's very, very forgiving. And whoever, if they make it to the Big Ten championship game, they're a massive favorite in that game.
Yeah, obviously.
So to get them at 6-1, I don't think that's a bad flyer on a dark horse. Although, again, I love Michigan this year. Like I said, they're my favorite team in the country besides Georgia. So this is certainly just a value flyer. I don't know that I'll even actually have any actual investment on this play. So, all right, let's look at win totals. Let's start with your over. Where are you at over the win totals?
Well, I'm just going to stick with Wisconsin. So 8.5 at -130. And I mentioned when I talked about them as a dark horse that they'll be 6-0 out of the gate. That's because they're favored in all 6 games. It's Buffalo, at Washington State, home to Georgia Southern, at Purdue, home to Rutgers, home to Iowa. They're 6-0. With that schedule right now. Then they go to Illinois, which is one of their tough road tests. It's also a trap game because they're home against Ohio State the next week. So let's say, all right, maybe they lose both of those games. You bounce back with wins against Indiana and Northwestern. All of a sudden, that's your 8 wins right there. Pick up a 9th win against either Nebraska or Minnesota. I think this team is talented enough to win 10 games. I think you're going to see a very un-Wisconsin-like offense from Luke Fickell and Phil Longo. It's not going to be just the running game. The running game will be there. And Wisconsin defensively will be strong as well because they have the big guys up front. But it's going to be more of an open passing attack that they have not had in several years. They got the right quarterback to do it. They got the right coach to do it. I think this is at least a 9-win team. Over 8.5 wins for Wisconsin, -130.
I'm going to go with Corn. And I'm expecting the coaching change at Nebraska to pay immediate dividends, sort of the way you saw it with Illinois when Brett Bielema came in for Lovie Smith. You know, they jumped 3 games the next season. Then the season after that, they were 8-5. I think Nebraska, who lost a ton of close games last year. Remember, they lost like 4 games by 3 points or less. I think they lost 2 more by less than a touchdown. And I think Matt Rule is going to have an early impact because he killed it in the transfer portal. Jeff Sims is going to be instantly the starting quarterback, and he's instantly the best quarterback Nebraska's had in probably 6-7 years. That's a position they've struggled with. I think Jeff Sims is automatically, especially with Rule, I think is automatically going to find some success. They brought in Eric Gilbert, who was looked at as like one of the 2 or 3 best tight end prospects in the country from Georgia. He just didn't get any playing time because he plays behind the best tight end in the country in Brock Bowers. So he transfers to Nebraska. The defense has to get better, but Rule had a really nice defensive class, including a top 5 defender out of Texas and Princewell Umanmielen. Good luck with that. But he's going to carry the pass rush unit and should have an immediate impact. Importantly for Nebraska, the schedule misses Penn State. It misses Ohio State. And besides Michigan, I think every home game is winnable for Nebraska. There's a really important matchup right away against Colorado. If they beat Colorado, I think 6 wins is the floor. So I like Nebraska over 6 wins for my win total. Where are you going to go for an under? Who underperforms in the Big Ten?
We've talked about it before. It's Northwestern. It's under 3.5 wins at -160.
Yeah, you got to pay some juice now.
It's juiced for a reason, but Fitzgerald gone, and the program's in shambles. I can see players leaving after 4 games, saving their eligibility and entering the transfer portal. And just look at how much that Rutgers spread moved already in week 1. If they lose that game, they're probably only going to get 2 wins. They're probably going to beat UTEP and Howard, and that's it. Like, there's no other wins on there. There's no games where they'll be favored besides the UTEP game and the Howard game. The rest of their schedule, if you're looking for an upset win over somebody, maybe home against Purdue, you can upset them at the end of the year. And even if they do that, it's 3 wins. If they lose to Rutgers, which now they're 7.5-point dogs, it's going to be real hard.
If they lose to Rutgers, they can't win. They can't win 4 games. I agree.
It's going to be really hard for them. And we saw, like I said, how much that spread moved from whatever it was 3, I think it was, to 4 to 7.5 with the coaching news of Pat Fitzgerald being gone. I just think there's too much of a cloud over this entire program that I think it's just going to be a terrible year, one to forget for Northwestern.
Well, I don't disagree with your pick, but I'm hoping that Northwestern wins that first game because I'm going Rutgers under 4.5. And Greg Schiano, he turned over a good chunk of his coaching staff, which he had to. The offense was so dreadful. But it looks like they're going to continue to run Gavin Wimsatt out there. And he could not be – you couldn't have a worse quarterback. Well, I guess you can. Here's why I say you can. He completed 44.8% of his passes last year. That was good for 145th out of 146 quarterbacks that attempted at least 125 passes. You're going against me on this.
I'm going against you on this because I don't think Wimsatt's going to be the quarterback. It's going to be Evan Simon. He's the best passer of the group, and that first game against Northwestern sets the tone for the entire season because assuming they win that game, again, we just mentioned it, they are 7.5-point favorites in that game. They win that game, they're going to be 4-1 after they lose to Michigan and beat Wagner. Northwestern, Temple, home to Vatek. They lose to Michigan. They beat Wagner. That's 4 wins right there. All we need to hit this over is one upset victory, and it might not even be an upset victory because Michigan State stinks. And when they roll into whatever they're calling the stadium now, SHI Stadium or whatever they're calling the Rutgers Stadium now these days, Jersey Mike's, I don't know. Whatever happens, that Michigan State game could be the win that gets them to 5, or you're just hoping for an upset somewhere down the line, maybe final game of the year against Maryland.
Here's why I don't think it even matters who plays quarterback. They lost their top 3 wide receivers from last year. They lost half their offensive line again.
This team does it on defense. If you look at last year,
right?
No
doubt, it's legit again.
And they return a lot of their talent from a lot of their talent on defense from last year. This is the thing. You mentioned their offense sucks, and I agree with you. It sucked last year. But in the games that they scored 21 points, they were undefeated.
Well, the problem, how many times did Rutgers score 21 points is the question.
4 for 3 games? 4 games.
Okay, well, that's the point.
They scored 22 against Boston College, 66 against Wagner. They beat Temple scoring 16. They beat Indiana scoring 24. They had 21 in a loss against Michigan State, but in every other game, they scored under 3 touchdowns. That's the point I'm trying to make. If they can just find a way offensively to score 3 touchdowns in games, they're going to win more than 4 games. They're not going to win 6, but I think 5 is a good number.
Here's what I think. I believe that Rutgers also lost one of their most important players this offseason. They had the Ray Guy winner from last season in Adam Korsak. And when you punt the football as much as Rutgers punts the football, that's a pretty key loss. When you're always behind the sticks, because there's no way their offense is going to suddenly become dynamic.
No.
They don't have good players. You've got to be able to play special teams, and losing that guy, I think, is a big deal. Here's what I'll say. I think there's 3 key games on their schedule, because I'm going to say Wagner and Temple are free squares.
And I think Northwestern's a free square.
I still don't think it's a free square. I think it's a game they should win.
They should win. All right. So we're giving them 2 free squares.
I think Virginia Tech and Indiana, those are the games that are going to be the toughest games. That's going to decide if they win 5 games or not.
I think it's the Virginia Tech game that decides it, because I have them, if I do the whole win-loss, win-loss, win game, like I said, I have Rutgers going 4-1 after the Wagner game. I have them starting the season 3-0, beating Virginia Tech, winning those first 3 home games, getting blown out at Michigan, and then beating Wagner 4-1. And all I got to do in the second half of the season to get this win total is pick up 1 win.
The only winnable game is at Indiana.
Or home to Michigan State.
Maybe.
Or maybe there's a home to Maryland. Maybe at the end of the year, that team's not playing for anything. And if there's a chance for a bowl game, teams could rise up. Sometimes you have a 5-win team that makes a bowl game. You don't have to do the 6 wins anymore, right? Because of the teams the academic rules and whatnot. So I don't know. I just think that if you can find a better win total out there than 4.5, like if you get a 4, play the over.
I don't think you're going to find that, though.
No.
Well, I'm glad. I think especially once the Northwestern drama happened.
Yeah.
I'm glad to have some action on this. So green button bet. I'm on Rutgers under 4.5.
Are you? Are you?
Scott is at home.
Are you?
No surprise. Scott is a homer.
Of the Raritan.
Over 4.5 for Scott. So there you go. There is our Big Ten breakdown. Next week, what? Big 12 we'll do?
Big 12.
Big 12 next week.